probably challenge or at least request that they put more information on, because it's pretty loose. And one of the big pieces of information that I found is they're going to take out another black neighborhood for another stormwater pond. So
Ooh.
that has not come to the public's attention. I think I'm probably the only person who knows that outside of the city of Tallahassee. And it's not right.
Are we live right now?
Yeah, we're all kinds of live right now.
Excellent. Well,
Now
the world knows.
I guess now the world knows. Okay.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Florida Action Podcast. I'm here with Max and Sierra, and we're here to talk about all things local government, Tallahassee, Leon County, hopefully some environment, because I know that's a passion of Max's, Sierra's, and mine. And I'm going to toss it over to Sierra to get it going.
Howdy. Well, really, I'm going to toss it back to Max because we're having this today because Max is our he's our environmental expert and development expert, and there is a BluePrint meeting coming up, a very important one, and so we kind of wanted to just get together so Max could give everybody everything they need to know about BluePrint to be at that meeting. What is it, Max? October 13th, or is it the 15th?
Well, the next BluePrint meeting is not actually until December, but next week's meeting of the joint city and county, I'm not exactly sure what they call it, planning committee or something like that, will be either voting to approve the master plan for Welaunee, or the city of Tallahassee has voted to delay transmitting. I have to get my terms down right here because there's like 2 or 3 meetings and steps that they have to go through to approve this. They approve the transmission to the state, so they let them know that the state has to review this development, and then they have to vote again to confirm that. But this is, I think it's the 13th and next week. And what we're requesting is that they delay this until next year so we can actually come up with a real master plan that protects the environment and the development up there. And there are a lot of groups in town, in particular Keep It Rural, who has come up with an amazing plan for this 3,500 acre piece of property that preserves the environment. It preserves the entire ecosystem. And it's a much better plan overall, but it doesn't seem like people like Chairman Deloge are interested in it. After watching the environmental forum last night, they said, well, basically we just need to get it done. It doesn't matter if we do it right or not. But
there's no rush on this, right? Because isn't Welaunee a plan to build basically another subdivision basically as big as Southwood, maybe bigger, and there's no reason to rush this, right?
No, like the proponents keep saying, this has been 30 years in the making, and they keep saying, well, we don't, there's no boogeyman around the corner, there are no developers, this isn't going to start for years and years and years. So the question is, why is this being rushed? And the final approval would be on November 10th is what the staff is recommending, which just so happens to be right before the new commissioners are set. So, I wonder why it's trying to get pushed through now when they have the votes. And there's just a really tangled web between the land use planning departments of both the city of Tallahassee, Leon County, and BluePrint. Mm-hmm. And the lawyers for the Metler family who own the Welaunee plantation. Let's get it straight. It was an actual plantation, and there are slave graveyards and other cultural artifacts, I'm sure, littered across this 3,500 acres. But the real question is, why are we voting in another 3,500 acres into the city of Tallahassee? They had to annex it, which means we are going to be providing all of these services: fire, police, maintaining roads, schools, do we need more schools? We don't even know. They haven't even done an actual financial analysis of how this is going to impact us going forward. And it's going to be huge. And it goes specifically against the comp plan. Comp plan is the law, and it says that we are to encourage development on the south and west sides of town that need it, that desperately need money coming into these communities. And for people to say, oh, well, it's not going to affect that. Of course it will, because those are tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars that we are going to be paying to maintain this infrastructure once it's done. And yeah, so I know I've yapped. I don't know if you guys want to hear more or.
I want to hear so much more.
You know, it's from my perspective, it's pretty sick. And I think, yes, this property will be developed, and that's fine. Right now is not the time. And to just rush it, even without a good plan, stormwater plan, it's crazy. And, you know, this is a huge area. It's like downtown, midtown, side town, French town, like it's all, that's the amount of land mass that we're talking about here. It's
right.
And the other issue is, well, once we create all these homes, they're about $300,000 a piece. That's not affordable. And who's going to be living there, right? Mostly affluent white voters.
Or
And
affluent black voters, but they're affluent, and that's the problem in today's society. It's a money, no money thing.
Yes. But when you talk about the South Side, where you are primarily black, and there are lots of disenfranchised voters there. We have something around Tallahassee called Capitol Circle, and it's a 4-lane road, 2 lanes all the way around Tallahassee. And there are people that live inside of there that are not within city limits, in particular on the South Side. So they can't vote for city commissions seats. And that's extremely important. So we're actually creating voters on the Northeast side, and we're ignoring the ones on the South that really have needed help. Let's face it, for generations.
They also pay their taxes. They pay business taxes, sales taxes, property taxes. They pay taxes on everything, and that's the problem, is that they're paying to support white privilege up north, right?
Yes, that's exactly it.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the other element of this too, just from a privileged white person standpoint as well, who like lives in District 4, there's a reason I live way out in the middle of nowhere, you know, and so do a lot of people, is because they want that homey country vibe. And put this giant development, you know, like I would have bought a house in Midtown if I wanted to live in town. And I think that sentiment rings clear for a lot of people who live in District 4, is that we would have bought our property in town if we wanted to live in town. And it doesn't necessarily like decrease the value of your home, you know, financially, but it decreases the value you have and you put in your home and how you feel about living in your home. And I think that's an important element that's not being discussed, especially when it comes to Brian Deloge and the fact that he is ignoring what his constituents want when it comes to Welaunee, because District 4 doesn't want Welaunee either. And it begs the question is, then who is Welaunee for?
Right. Who's making the most money off of all this?
A select group of people.
Yeah, there are plenty of campaign donations to quite a few of the commissioners that come from these developers in this area. And, you know, it just keeps me coming back to the mantra that we need to change fundamentally how we permit and develop going forward, because a lot of these environmental regulations and development regulations were gutted about 10 years ago. Like, we actually had a strong tree ordinance. If you had a 5-foot wide oak tree, yeah, you probably can't cut it down. You're going to have to put the house next to the tree, right? Instead of on top of the tree. And you see this all the time where the excuse is, oh, well, we're not required to do it, or we can't do it this way. Well, we have good engineers in this city and designers, and we've been doing this for years, decades. We can do this going forward. And there's so many loopholes. Like, you can look at the current Wolani development. I think that one's like 1,000, 1,500 acres. I'd have to look back. But for example, the growth management department and the permitting department is allowing the developers to clear cut the land, and instead of replanting, I mean, first of all, replanting 10 little trees for a 100-year-old oak is not acceptable in my mind. We need to be preserving what we have. But they're allowing them to offset the replanting with the trees that they are legally not allowed to cut down in the canopy road zone. So they keep saying, oh, it's great, we got canopy roads and we're preserving like 50 feet of trees along Miccosukee Road. And again, why is there a loophole? Why can they possibly say that that is replanting to just the trees they can't cut down? They're counting as the replanting. And where is all that water supposed to go? It goes into a giant stormwater pond that a citizen had to sue to get fixed. And that water spilled over into the nearby neighborhoods and killed a bunch of trees, and it's still not really working right. So, you know, that keeps us going to our conversation of equitable development. And I'll plug this on Sunday. I'm having a live at 1:00 on our Facebook page, Save Historic Structures, Heritage Trees. There's a comma in between there, and it's an equitable development summit in relation to Wolani and gentrification, because
be nice. The county commissioners who are coming to vote on this, as well as the city commissioners, showed up to this. They say they've reached out for public comment, and they say they've reached out to the public to hear what they're saying. Well, we are having an equitable development summit, so, you know, Brian Desolage, Rick Miner, Kristen Dozier, Nick Maddox, Jimbo Jackson, Bill Proctor, Jeremy Matlow, Curtis Richardson, Elaine Bryan, and Mr. John Daly. We'd love to see you there.
That'd be great. I'll send out an email tonight or tomorrow morning to all them and invite them to that as well.
Yeah.
We will add the link to the description portion of this podcast, and then eventually on the live feed too.
Excellent. Thank you.
No problem.
So what I was going to ask is, so at least from my perspective recently, you know, and I've been doing some thinking, is I think that a lot of the inequity in this town could be solved in a few policy changes in a few select places, like LCS, LCSO. What organization do you think you could say would be the place we need to start targeting in the next year or two to create policy change for development to be more equitable? Is there one, or have they spread it out on purpose that we couldn't really like just go to one?
I would say there are two.
Okay.
The first is our growth management and permitting department in the city of Tallahassee. And we just really need to change how these developments go through public comment and the ordinances that are involved. Like, for example, I know this is the county, but the county has a low intensity development portion of their ordinance, but it's optional, and we need to make that standard. And I mean, there are even incentives for, you know, using low intensity development if you choose to do so. So there are a lot of ways that we can reward developers for using these environmentally friendly development, because in the end, water rolls downhill. I'm going to keep saying that. If it rolls to the south, typically, And people further on are impacted, and it costs so much money to remediate down the road than doing it right the first time.
Right.
And but to answer your question, I still think that BluePrint is driving the cycle of poverty in Tallahassee right now. And it originally was developers and environmental activists coming together to build good projects, and they have built some, that's true, but now it seems to be a slush fund for developing new communities rather than fixing the communities that desperately need it right now. And we'll be talking specifically on Sunday about some of these projects. And I think I've mentioned before that BluePrint had what I would call a racist, or at the very least classist, eminent domain policy, that when they do relocate people and people have to move for these projects, they pay them way less on the south side than they did anywhere else. And just like I said, they're about to bulldoze another neighborhood for another pond, and that A, should never happen, and B, that pond is not going to be used by any of those people, any of the people in the south. It's going to be coming from the north and the northeast side. So it's a double whammy. You get paid crap to move, and then the infrastructure doesn't even benefit you. So that's where the equity comes from. We need to make these projects work for people. And there's just so much that's been involved in the political process. That's just to give you a little primer. BluePrint has a bunch of projects that were approved by the person. They had like an approximate cost. And BluePrint, it's a half penny sales tax, and I think it's a 20-year increment. And over that 20 years, they're supposed to be raising about $900 and something million. Okay, that's a lot of money. That could replace, a third or half of the septic tanks that we have. That's a lot of money. But where the politics come in is the ranking, right? So now the politics, they brought it back for a referendum, the people vote. Now Welaunee is at the top, and the Northeast is at the top, for whatever reason other than just money and development. But and the other thing is, since we haven't even raised this money yet, this is like year one of BluePrint 2020 that they just reauthorized. None of this money has actually been collected. So how do they pay for these projects? They take out bonds, and there is debt service involved in these bonds. So they're taking out $100 million bond for Welaunee. And they say, oh, well, we don't have any, we can't do the Southside projects yet. They're coming later. We can't change it up. Well, yes, you've made the decision to take out $100 million bond to pay for this. They could have said, hey, we need $100 million for the Southside, and done it. But that's not what's happening. And we just end up paying like 20 or 30% more than if we just waited 5 years. Just hold off. It's COVID season, right? Why the heck are we building anything? Let's get some of the money actually in the coffers and then spend it. Because it's makes no sense. My father, I can hear my father yelling at me, like, that is irresponsible, Max. You don't spend your money that way.
That's right.
And it makes no sense. So
right. And who sits on BluePrint? It's the commissioners and the county commissioners. Who else is on BluePrint?
Well, the BluePrint IA board is comprised of the city and county commissioners. So there are 12 voting members, and they're the ones who make the final decisions. But then you have a bunch of unelected staff members, basically.
Yep.
And these are people that are not accountable to the voters. And I would say there's an issue across the board city, county, and BluePrint with
Mhm.
staff. And the biggest thing to me is I don't think the commissioners usually take enough time to actually read what they're voting on and get a real grasp of what. And they say, oh, well, staff recommends this. Let's go with that. That sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
No, you need to read it and comprehend it yourself.
Right.
Because, but BluePrint is under basically an overarching hierarchy. It's called PLACE, which is, I don't even remember what the acronym is.
Yeah.
And Ben Pingree is the director of PLACE. But then under BluePrint, you have the Office of Economic Vitality, which in my opinion also was kind of like a slush fund. And they modified the BluePrint $900 million for part of it to go to economic development. So now part of that was taken off. This was all supposed to go to infrastructure development. And that's the pot of money that they are building this convention center out of, that went from 20 million to 40 million. And then 13 million on that 40 is debt service. Okay, so we're wasting $13 million to build this thing. And I just don't see little to no oversight in any of this. And by the way, the planning department is also under this BluePrint PLACE hierarchy, which approves the Wilani, comp plan amendments. And another thing that should be mentioned is there is a strict deadline for comp plan amendments, which was in September. And the funky part is the city of Tallahassee is somehow applying for this comp plan change, the Wilani comp plan. They're the applicant for the Mettler family and the people who own the land. They are doing the comp plan amendment application for them, and they submitted it 6 weeks late. And they said, well, no, that's fine. We just kind of do it this way. And they gave some reason of like an old contract that they had, but it's not, I don't think what they did was legal. And the way they brought this up. So it's, but unfortunately, fighting the comp plan amendments in Florida is very difficult, and it's very expensive because you can be eat all the legal fees if you lose. So it's very difficult. Yeah. So.
And I want to go back to something you said about staff. Is the staff are the ones bringing these so theoretically staff could be bringing to Tallahassee developers that want to build equitably and who want to incrementally and who want to build in a way that is okay with the people who live there. Like I know, for instance, like in the art district in Railroad Square, that whole Gain Street project was not something any of the business owners or any of the people who lived in that area wanted. But what they were able to do, with a huge fight, is they were able to get a developer to build those box cars that are behind All Saints and stuff, because that goes with the aesthetic and it's artsy and it's cute and the people were okay with that. But that took the community themselves having to go find the developer and advocating for a really long time to do it. And it's a shame that the art district even had to do that in the first place, because are we not paying with our tax dollars for all of these people in a roundabout way to be doing just that, right? How do we get staff to do the right thing? Is there any way to hold staff accountable? Is there a list of staff somewhere that we can start emailing? How do we get staff's attention?
I mean, I don't know. If you find out, let me know, because we've been dealing with this for 15 years, and the Gain Street project that you refer to was actually done by the CRA, Community Redevelopment Agency, which is part of the city. That's a different funding source, but you are absolutely right. They're the ones who worked with the developers to make the contracts, and what they did with this money, and I didn't hear this 15 years ago. I wasn't quite as involved back then, but the idea behind building all this luxury student housing using money that was supposed to help blighted poor neighborhoods, by the way, pull themselves up, was that we need to do this because once they all build this and they pay the money back with the increases in taxes. So the whole idea behind a CRA is you redevelop something and property taxes and everything, it's more, and then you get more money coming back. And I believe that they're almost done paying that back, 10, 15, 20 years later, whatever it is. But they said, well, we need to do that first, so then we can help out Frenchtown. Then we can help out these other blighted. No, that's BS, because the developers got the best economy in American history. And what did Frenchtown get? Another depression without any money, any stimulus, anything. But the student housing that's on Gain Street, that's $700 a bedroom or more.
I think it's more than that. I think it's like 12.
It's an insane amount of money, and they only have to be half full for them to make money. So I think our best estimates are that about half of those apartments that they've built are just sitting there empty. And that could have been part of the development agreement. Said, okay, you can have this money, you can build your student housing, but the second half. And by the way, they bought up a bunch of historic Black neighborhoods, demolished them to build this stuff, pushed them out. Well, that could have been part of it. Half of it could have been affordable housing. Half of it, that would have been a great project. Everyone been happy. But no, they're just sitting there empty. And I'll finish up with the CRA real fast. Is it shares an issue with BluePrint, the fact that the salaries to run these things, the CRA is $500,000 a year just for salaries. That's like 3 affordable houses a year, 2 BluePrint, their salary and operating budget is $5 million a year. Times 20 years, that's $100 million.
Wow.
That's going to go into administering this. And somehow we have to have a third, and this was actually Commissioner Deloge's own words, the third form of government blueprint. Well, maybe we need a referendum to actually make it a third form of government with elected leaders. And that's one thing I would consider is we should maybe make a referendum and make the city manager an elected position, make the blueprint manager an elected position. And that would at least give us a chance to have a little bit more say in it. Of course, there's dark money and all sorts of other stuff involved in these elections, so you can't count on it. But I don't know. It's hard. It's hard when you got the good old boy network who's just really got their teeth into everything.
Right. And we'll see. I mean, we'll see. I think after this election will be very telling as to, whether or not like a People's Campaign funded grassroots like Jack Porter was like a fluke, or if it's going to happen again with Kelly Oddie and Brian Welch. These are people that the community supports and who aren't getting dark money. I just put something on Facebook today, but there's absolute proof that there's an action pack of dark money, like you were talking about, funding Brian DeSalage and Carolyn Cummings campaigns. And it's out of St. Augustine. It was created a couple months ago. It's not great. And there's no representation there. And that's why we need campaign financing reform. But I was going to ask another question. So Oh, what I was going to say is I remember too on Gain Street, because you had kind of touched on this. I remember that they had told the businesses that they bought and the local, like the bookstore and the all these great little shops that made All Saints District this adorable little arts district that we had. That I used to love. I grew up in this town. We used to go to First Fridays, and there'd be a drum circle, and I had such a special place in my heart, and so many people in this town do. But since it's been gentrified, I barely go there. And they told the people that they bought the businesses from that they'd be able to move back in. Not when the rent at the bottom of those places, I swear to God, I think the figure was, it was $700 a square foot. The rent is insane. Be there.
It's about $25 a square foot.
Okay.
Per year? I think it's really expensive. I mean, in Railroad Square, I was paying $7.50 a square foot, $8 a square foot. So that it's about 4 times any sort of being even close to being affordable. And you're right. They said, oh, well, Gain Street is, we're going to have artist studios. It's going to be great, this and that. And I'm an artist. There's no way I can afford that, period.
Yep.
I mean, they made so many promises on Gain Street. I just went back and looked at the video. There was tree preservation. We're going to preserve all of our trees, and it's going to be great, and this and that. And they even cut down the oak trees that were on the street, the ones that were right next to the street that shaded you. They cut them down because, oh, well, we need to allow the developers to build up right to the property line. And they also gave them variances to build 8 stories instead of 5. It was variance, just, yeah, sure, just do whatever you want. And it's just, I don't know how to say it other than it's sad, because a little bit of compromise would have gone a long way, and following through with some promises would have gone a long way, and everyone would have had it would have been a great project for everyone.
Right.
I'll throw one more little, thing into the CRA and Gain Street discussion. First of all, I heard that the second reasoning for allowing this to happen was, well, all the people will move out of the existing apartment complexes, the rich ones, to this area. So then that'll make it even more affordable somehow with the existing housing. That was whoa, I couldn't believe that, and how that could even be presented as the truth.
Right.
Maybe you actually build new affordable houses for people.
Right.
But who you want to see who benefits from this infrastructure, who benefits from the College Town and Gain Street. Well, who owns the land? It is the FSU boosters. The FSU boosters own the land, and there's some sweetheart leasing deal that they have with the big development companies and the people who've developed these student housing, and who's going to be inheriting the convention center, FSU. And then we had this project called the Airport Gateway, which was not I don't think it was ever on the books, but they brought it up and they had to have a couple votes. Either that or they significantly expanded it. And guess where that road goes? To FSU's southern campus, right to it, so they can develop. And that's $65 million they're spending on this. And they're going through the Providence neighborhood to do it. And you just keep going back, man. FSU. I didn't vote for infrastructure for FSU.
Right. This is, especially when it comes to development, but really a lot of the other issues in our town as well. But the screwing over poor people for the interests of developers does not really change with the change in mayorship. I mean, I've only been involved for so long, but I remember sitting in Andrew Gillum's commission room. And I remember when that giant apartment complex with like, that they just finished building in Frenchtown, that they never told Frenchtown about. The only reason there was even able to be a fight, well, they sent emails, right, to a group of people in a neighborhood that predominantly does not have as much internet. And the only reason it got tied up is because there was this one tiny little parcel of land that the developer hadn't been able to sneakily buy yet, and that it had to be ran through the city commission, and we had to sell it to the developer, and the people had to like agree and get public input and everything. And we were able to have this like big fight, and we gave them all these proposals and like asked for a I can't say this word, moratorium on development in Frenchtown, to like classify it as a historical neighborhood, which it is, and get one of those overlays. They refused to do it. The developer had made promises even to work with the people, and like I haven't seen any of the things I remember the developer promising, but perhaps I'm wrong.
No,
they promised like
you're not wrong.
Like all of this was like promised to the people in Frenchtown, and they were supposed to be able to like host things on Fridays and Saturdays. And I haven't seen little shops and little food trucks and all this stuff that was supposed to be there. And not to mention that land, the people in Frenchtown had already submitted, several different groups submitted like suggestions for that land. And it's even when there is a fight and the people get the developers to say, okay, we'll work with you, it never ends up happening because who's holding them accountable to do it?
Exactly.
No one.
Yeah, and just to give you a primer on that, development's called the standard of BS. But that wiped out the actual oldest historic part of Frenchtown, and Frenchtown is the oldest Black neighborhood and community in Florida, period. And it dates back to, I think, the 1800s, and even before then, it was, I don't know, I have to brush up on my history, but I think it was French. The French immigrants were here, and they forced them over there, then they kicked them out, and the same cycle over and over and over again. But it actually, what was that trail that went all the way out to the West Coast? There was I'm drawing a blank, but it's famous. There was a road that went in the 17 or 1800s all the way out west.
Like the Oregon Trail or something like that.
Well, yeah, but the southern version of that, and it went right there at the corner of Brevard Street. It's right there.
Yeah.
And this really is like one of the most historic places, and now it's a 6-story apartment complex for FSU kids, and it's sad. It devastated people in Frenchtown, and
did
just really.
Like, I think I first, people ask me why I'm so harsh with the politicians, and it's honestly because of this thing we're talking about right now. Because I remember being like 21 years old and sitting in this commission meeting and watching this woman, and she was like everyone's grandma. Like, she was so sweet. And watching her just like break down when Andrew Gillum and Scott Maddox and the commission just pushed to agree with this, because she knew right then and there that she was no longer going to be able to die in the house that her mother died in, her grandma died in, she lived in all her life for generations and generations, because by the time she does die, she will not be able to afford her property taxes anymore. And
oh yeah.
It just, and that right there, and it's because it's not, you know, it's not even, at this point, it's not even about race. Andrew Gillum, our black mayor, did this. It's about poor people.
About
And
money.
it's a classist thing. And I just, and that's when I was just like, you know what? It's not like they taught me in high school and middle school. This is not how the government works. They have not been listening to the people. Something's got to change. Something's got to give, you know? And it just, oof. So that's like a hard issue for me, that Frenchtown development, because that opened the floodgates to gentrification in Frenchtown. And it's gotten worse ever since. And it's bad, and it's going to keep getting worse unless, you know, we do something. And I'm so grateful for everything you've been doing, Max, because
Me too.
you know, we gotta,
Thank you.
you'd think at some point, you know, they'll start listening and taking on, you know, our policy ideas. We'll see.
You'd think, I mean, and it's not like we're asking for a lot here.
Right.
For the most part, we're really just asking for a compromise. This isn't, and I get this all the time. And I mean, first of all, there was this narrative created that, well, the white liberals are coming in to speak for everyone. I'm like, the truth is the truth. And yeah, you're right. I don't live on the quote unquote South Side. I live in 32304, which is the poorest zip code in Florida. Okay, does that count? You know, I've been living here for 15 years. I know what the hell is going on. And I'd been watching all this stuff from the sidelines, and I got involved in the group, the Historic Structures site in 2018 when the historic buildings at Cascades Park, there's a historic jail there, an Art Deco building that was integral to the civil rights movement, that meant a lot to a lot of people. And the answer is we couldn't have saved all of it, you know. It was a really old building full of asbestos and other things like that, but we could have saved some of it. We could have turned some of it into art studios. And, you know, there was a citizens advisory committee. And this is another thing that we really need to look into, is strengthening our citizens advisory committees, because they always point to them and say, oh, well, they said yes. Or maybe they said no, because it doesn't matter what they say. They have no power. And I think all of them should have subpoena power, just like a police citizens review board. And I think that there should actually be some accountability there, because, for example, they were working with the developer, because for some reason they think that putting luxury apartments in Cascades Park is going to help attract like young people and business and whatnot, but no one can afford them. But there was an oak grove there. There were 20 live oaks. One was 8 feet wide. Okay. I mean, I actually never got to see it before it died. I saw it on the flatbed truck, and it looked like something from, you know, when the dinosaurs were around. It was so big. And the Citizens Advisory Committee with the developer had a plan to save half of these trees. The second half, 3 of them out of the 10 were dead or dying already. And that would have been a compromise. But why does it always, do they get, excuse my French, shat upon all these plans, and then it's just whatever the developer wants to do oh yeah, we'll just pay $300,000 to take out the trees and the fine, whatever. It's cool. But I mean, this rampant development it's like the Wild West. And our water quality is suffering, our drinking water quality. Everything is suffering. And this, again, just goes back to the equitable. Is this equitable? Is clear cutting 10 acres on the north side and then buying redevelopment capacity into a pond on the south side, because that's where the water goes, right next to your neighborhood, is that equitable?
Right.
And we spent $20 million on that project. Is that equity?
Right.
I don't think so. So something has to change.
I don't know, we could talk to some lawyers, but I don't see why we couldn't have like a CPAC, but except for development, and like make that a ballot referendum. Like if we had like an equitability like development council or something.
Yeah, somebody that vetted every developer before it even talked to a politician.
Right, and that's who the developers would have to go through. I don't know how that would work, but that could be like we've got 2 years of dead space to work on, so you know, we've got time to start trying to push for things we need in different segments of town. And I think something like that, or like you said, you know, pushing for Reese Goad in the city manager position to be an elected position, pushing for, you know, more transparency with staff. And, you know, I guess the way to do that is just keep going to city and county commission meetings and saying, hi, we'd like to see your reports that you see from the staff before you vote on them. Or even that, I don't see any reason why, if meetings are public, you know, the city and county commissions can't release those documents to the public far beyond before they come to vote on them, so that we can be prepared for that. You know, I don't see any reason that can't happen. But let me get the three, because I know you run StandUp Tallahassee. Will StandUp Tallahassee be posting anything or sending out templates? Like, what can people who don't know a whole lot, where can they find information so they can send in some public comments or just like read the same script? Because what would be great is to have a bunch of people sign up live to be like, we would like da 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 da.
Yeah, Stand Up Tallahassee. We're Stand Up TLH on Facebook, and that's more of a political activist arm. I try to at least stay as neutral as I can for the historic structures site. I know personally the administrators of that site endorse candidates for the primary, but we try to see the perspective from everyone in that site, and that's the common theme there. But Stand Up will be sending out an email, and we'll be posting tonight or tomorrow morning. And you know, we'll have some talking points, but I would encourage people to talk from the heart, not just read a form letter. How is this going to impact you? How do you feel about this? Do you think there was enough public input? You know, do you think that we should be clear cutting? Do you think that we should be preserving our ecosystems? Talk about what matters to you and try to connect with our commissioners, you know, and I think a lot of them are trying to do the right thing, but when the truth of the information that's coming to them through the staff and other sources, let's face it, maybe tainted, you know, I had one commissioner ask me, okay, so is staff lying to us? And I said, I don't know how to say it any other way. Unfortunately, that's what's happening, because I mean, I'll give you an example, is this Boynton Still Pond where I really started to get heavily involved. And I know there are lots of people that, you know, are on the other side of this that think it was vetted and it was great and it's going to be good for the community. I mean, we're all entitled to our opinions, but their main reason for having to locate this pond right in the middle of a black neighborhood, historic black neighborhood. And by the way, we don't really have very many of those left anymore. I mean, even in the last like 10 years, I can think of 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 4 of our oldest historically black neighborhoods demolished, just gone. But they said, well, you know what, we can't put the culvert for the stormwater underneath the railroad tracks. CSX won't let us do it. I mean, first of all, the ditch already goes under the train tracks. And second of all, they have this thing called directional drilling, which the city of Tallahassee does to install your gas pipes and water, whatever.
Right.
It would have taken them about a week to drill some pipes underneath there and connected it. The city owned all the land. It would have worked better, and it would have been cheaper, and no one would have had to have been displaced. And for them to say, this is the only way we can do it, we can't, it's not true. You know, there's a will, there's a way.
Right.
And
right.
there was no will.
Right.
So
yeah, exactly. And I think you made a good point is, you know, speaking from the heart, I think we gotta appeal to their humanity somehow, right? You know, like I think, and even though I give them a hard time, I think at the end of the day, even the commissioners who get bundled donations and have dark money behind them, someone loves them. You know, their family loves them, and they love someone else, and like they understand the concept of empathy, and they understand the concept. At least they like theoretically, you know.
Yeah.
And if there's a way to tap into that, you know, and it really would be good if, you know, people showed up to this meeting, even if it's not your thing. You know, I used to definitely kind of environmental stuff. It's trees. We've got bigger things to worry about, but it's all tied in together, you know, at the same time that, and Max is the one who really like helped me see this, is that like, you know, environmental justice is racial justice, is class justice, is justice in general. It's all tied in together, because with all these issues we have with the police in our schools and development, the people who end up getting hurt are the poor people. And so we all need, and let's be honest, it's like all of us are a lot closer to being poor than we are the developers and the people funding that. And I want to be real clear about that. Is I think people have this conception that, oh, I'm not one of these people who need help. And it's like, no. You are.
Mm-hmm.
You definitely are. When you sit there and you compare yourself to the Steve Bancors and to the Drew Jones and the Gazvinis, they have more money than you could ever dream of. And, you know, that's a whole nother thing. The one last thing I will say is that, you know, if we need to have a tax for the CSC, why don't we tax the 1% of Tallahassee who can afford it?
A developer tax.
Get $9 million right like that.
Mm-hmm.
well, and they actually do that in a lot of places. To build a, you know, you have to pay a fee, a development fee.
Right.
And it's not that much money on a $300,000 house. It's like $1,000. Okay.
Yeah.
So you have to pay an extra 0.5%.
Right.
And then it becomes more equitable.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point about the money, there's enough money here for everyone. There's enough money to come to a compromise and still make buku amounts of dollars. And I'm just going to keep going back to compromise. There's no reason why we can't compromise. And that's why people are pissed, because there never is a compromise. It's the moneyed interests who get what they want. And I mean, you're talking about the Standard in Frenchtown. What did the people get? I still haven't seen it. Maybe they've made it, but they're like, oh, well, we're going to put in a $50,000 statue to commemorate the neighborhood. No, I want the effing neighborhood, you know, back. Or hey, how about we develop side by side with the neighborhood, right, and work with them? And you know, there's a perfect example of this. It's the Stearns Mosley neighborhood, which is right south of Gain Street and actually right north of Boynton Still neighborhood. Okay, and another historically Black but also poor, because there were a lot of poor white people who lived there too. And there were about 150 huge, beautiful live oak trees there that were all clear cut. And in that neighborhood, a lot of that intergenerational family land was bought up for the tax deed after the 2008 crisis. So 2008 crisis, I mean, that put a lot of people out of their homes, a lot of intergenerational land gone. And the developer came in, you know, bought a lot of that up for cheap. Some people got paid well. If they could, you know, hold out until the very end, some of them got paid well. But if you look at the neighborhood, there was plenty of room to build and develop and turn it into something that was beautiful and vibrant. And I mean, I know plenty of people, lots of people who lived there, white, black, whatever. They liked living there, and it's just never gonna stop. And you know, I wish I could share the picture with you right now, but you know, on this conceptual permit that I showed that they just applied for, talking about this new pond that's going to take out another neighborhood. Every single pond, and there were like 9 or 10 of them on there, was a black neighborhood. Every single one.
It's like they're not even trying to hide it anymore.
No.
It's just, and I'm so tired of being gaslit by, because that's what it is I'm so tired of being gaslit by the political establishment and being told that when we speak out that we're dissenters and that we're just afraid of the government, and or we just don't trust the government. And we're not asking for the moon. I am not saying I'm never going to pay taxes. Like, I will pay taxes. I'm fine with paying taxes. I would just like my tax dollars to go to, I don't know, making sure people aren't starving and being killed by the police and being told to move away so that we can put ponds in. Like, and
yeah.
I don't understand. And it wasn't me, but it was someone else who said it on another forum I had. And this person, he was one of the people who got hit by the truck when that white nationalist drove through. And then Jack Campbell, of course, refused to charge him and all of that. And, you know, he said the Tallahassee, you know, the like politicians and the political establishment in Tallahassee are abusing us. And that's what it is. It's abusive. And when, you know, as someone who's been in an abusive relationship before, and as many people, you know, around town who have been in these type of situations, it's just not ethical and it's not okay. And I just wonder how, you know, it makes the people in power now feel that they literally are the abusers of the people of Tallahassee. And I wish they would just think of it that way, because when you start thinking about it that way, then, and if we are to assume that they're not doing it on purpose, right? And that, like, they just don't know better, and that they don't know that staff's lying to them, and they don't know, you know? If they just thought about it that way, then they would radically change the way they do politics. And I don't know how to make it, but
I was called idealistic once by a pretty famous Tallahassee politician, and for thinking that, you know, that's the way politics should work. I was like, I mean, they said it, you know, they said it's not a bad thing, right? But that's an idealistic viewpoint. For me, that's realistic. And if I were a politician, I would be representing the people and my district and whatever. I wouldn't be representing. I mean, look, we need developers. We need development. We need money coming in. We need this. But I'm going to be doing that to protect the people. Right. And I'll throw out one other little nugget here. Like the rest of Florida and a lot of other states, our current infrastructure is old, about 100 years old. Our sewage system in particular.
Oh.
And back in 2011, there was a secret order, consent order, through the Florida Department of Environmental Protection because of all these spills that we were having. We have a bunch of sewage spills. So they were forced to repair a bunch of these 100-year-old clay pipes, and at a cost of, I think, like $3 million a year for 10 years. And instead of, investing in that going forward and fixing what we have now, we're now trying to especially with this Walani thing, right? We already have 10 pounds of shit in a leaky 10-pound bag, right? So what happens when there's literally another 10 or 20 pounds of shit coming into those pipes? Well, there are going to be issues, and they're not going to be the issues in the new development. It's going to be in your neighborhood where that infrastructure runs. And
right.
because of these leaky pipes, and this is still the environmental side of things, in the wet season, we're finding out, and fortunately, the city of Tallahassee hired a firm to take a look at this, and they're doing a study, but they're finding in the wet season up to 6 million gallons of groundwater per day is being absorbed into the old clay pipes. So that means of the 30 million gallons of sewage that we process every day in the wet season, 20%, 6 million gallons is actually groundwater. And it costs so much money to treat that. I mean, the city is trying to say, well, it's variable costs, and we'll have the same amount of people working in the same infrastructure. I mean, the accepted numbers about like $3 to $5 a gallon to treat sewage. Okay. So that's like $30 million a day. It's insane amount. If you just fixed it from the beginning, you would make up for it in 10 years. And then you'd have brand new infrastructure. Everyone would be happy. We're always playing catch up.
Yeah. And and just before we wrap up real quick, I know a thing we've always prided ourselves on in Tallahassee is, you can just turn on the tap and drink right out of there. I guess not anymore.
Well, yeah, and I know we're wrapping up here, but I got lots of stories, but this story here has to do with the county and permitting. And Falls Chase, which is where Costco is over on Mahan. That was a remnant parcel that the county could have bought for like $15 million or something like that. It was 300 something acres. That's a huge amount for like central Tallahassee, the core. And what's right below it is Lake Lafayette. And that's where our drinking water comes from. That's our drinking water supply. And they have permitted basically the clear cutting of over 300 acres of land. And there were significant Native American cultural sites. There significant, nature ecosystems there. And we're going to pay so much money, tens, hundreds of millions down the road to fix that because our water quality is going to go down. And we just have to do this in a better way.
Flint, Michigan is still 2 years now without water.
Yeah.
Gross.
And what's in Flint, Michigan? Well, a bunch of poor people. So.
Right.
All right. On that note, that happy note, I guess that's the show. Thanks for being on with us, Max.
Sure. Well, thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on the podcast.
You're the best.
Yeah.
Not
live, but for the live, the fancy edited and much more cleaner version of the podcast will be out in a day or so. But if you feel like watching us make a fool of ourselves on the live, you're welcome to do that as well.
Visit Florida Action Podcast on Instagram or Facebook, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts.
Bye.
Awesome.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you.
Bye.
All right. See you guys.
Bye, guys.